Hey everybody, it's our last week together. This hasn't been an easy semester, and it definitely has been different from all other semesters. I wish we were in person, and I could have gotten to know you better in a face-to-face sort of a version, but it is what it is, and COVID has ruined all of our lives, so here we are. But we made it to the end of the semester, and so congratulations on that. Just a couple of updates before I talk about some other things. Grading will continue until I'm done or I die, whichever happens first. Not sure at this point. My 467 classes are the ones I'm the most behind in because the work that y'all do is usually the most deep. And so it takes me a while to wade through all of those sort of things. So I apologize for being very behind. I'm working on it and I'll keep working on it. When I have all grades done for everything for the course, I will send you a message and let you know so you can look over everything before I turn grades into the university. So just be looking for that, but it will be a while from now. This week you don't have much to do because I want you to just focus on wrapping up sort of all the things that you need to do for the semester. This week, just a reflective sort of check-in about the class, what worked for you, what didn't, what improvements do you have for more virtual school for next semester. Your beyond the classroom activities are due by this Friday. So those are those outside sort of things, looking for mental and emotional health in the wild. And then for your final exam, you have your application papers that are due instead of an exam, and those are due next week during exam times. Other than that, mostly just work on keeping afloat. We're almost there, okay? For this last little bit of stuff, thinking about sort of the future of mental and emotional health. We've talked about a lot of things this semester. We know that there's a lot of ongoing sort of research in terms of brain scans, MRIs, looking at mental health and other sort of things through very physical and physiological sort of things. We know that ACEs are a huge frontier where we're really finding out a lot of information about how do we disrupt sort of the negative outcomes that come from having a traumatic childhood or things that happen to our children. But some other areas that are promising are some areas around spirituality and mental health. That's one area I don't touch a lot on because I'm not myself a spiritual person, but also the research is not there. It's largely been that in our society, science and faith are two very incompatible sort of things that are at odds with each other. That's not actually very true, but that is the way that our political discourse has set these sort of things up, that you're either a science person or a spiritual person. And so we don't often talk about where they can interact and intersect together. These things are important because people are whole human beings, right? As we've learned throughout this semester, people are complex and they have lots of different pieces to them. And so I think this is a really interesting place for research to go. I also think that with some of the issues around access and the fact that mental health care is hard to achieve, we know that pastoral care and spiritual caregivers are some of the most accessible sort of things. People might not be able to afford therapy, but church or other sort of places of worship are often free. And so people oftentimes, when they can't reach out to sort of a therapist or a psychologist or other sort of things, will seek solace in their faith. And some people do both. Some people say, yeah, I see a therapist and I have sort of my faith person to work through these sort of things. But because of the disconnect between sort of the science and the faith side, we have a lot of gaps and we have a lot of places where we could do some improvement to say, hey, if spiritual focus or religious focus works for you, how can we build that into sort of the Western medicine perspective of care? I think this is a big area for growth and change and other sort of things. Most of the time when we look at sort of the research related to this, we're looking at anecdotal sort of evidence rather than large scale sort of stuff. We also look at the ways in which religion harms people, which is true, but it is a skewed sort of perspective. Not all religious faiths and not all spirituality is harmful. Some, yes, is, and there is some very good research on sort of harmful effects of certain sort of religions, but we don't have a lot of really good contemporary sort of views about how we have nuanced discussions of religion, of what is helpful, what can we do side by side, what are these other sort of things. Oftentimes research is pretty limited in this area, so I think this is a really important area for growth and development. Another thing to talk about, just kind of in this hodgepodge of last minute sort of things, the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is sort of the end-all be-all diagnostic manual for mental health issues, is currently in its 5th edition. The DSM is published by the American Psychiatric Association. It's been published for decades, and it tells us how we diagnose people with mental health and illness. It offers a common language so that people across all specters can find standardized criteria and classify mental disorders so that we can work in sort of unison to figure out stuff. It's used by clinicians, researchers, drug regulation agencies, health insurance companies, pharmaceutical, legal system. It is pretty much the end all be all of mental health sort of stuff. We're currently in DSM-5, which has been around for about 7 years. Every decade or so, they go through sort of a revamping to say, hey, what has changed and what is new in the field of mental and emotional health. What we do know is that since its first publication in the 50s, it has grown incrementally to add more and more mental health conditions, mental health disorders. We know part of this is due to medicalization and sort of this growing idea that everything needs to be medicalized, but also some of it comes from our nuanced ideas and our growth of knowledge. There are critiques of the DSM, and I think that's a really important thing for you to know. The National Institute of Mental Health, which is our government sort of funding agency, has some serious critiques and says the DSM is unscientific, and it looks at things from a very subjective sort of a view. It takes these sort of symptomology and puts them together rather than having the science lead these different sort of things. There's a lot of concern about the validity and reliability of the diagnostic categories. Again, something we care about much in science is, if every person is going to be judged by this, is this something that every person would come to? And there's some issues of validity and reliability with the DSM. It has a reliance on very superficial sort of symptoms, so things that we can report outward rather than diagnostic sort of stuff inside. And so that becomes problematic, right? Because it's a self-report kind of thing. There's an artificial line dividing sort of normal from mentally ill or diseased that is pretty arbitrary, right? How compulsive of a thought do you have to be somebody who has compulsive thoughts? How often does it occur? All these sort of things are rather artificial in terms of determining somebody who is well and not well. There's some cultural bias, obviously, in DSM. It's published by the West, and so it is not widely applicable. It's not used across all of the world. And so there are some issues there in terms of diagnosing people from different cultural backgrounds. Again, that issue and concern of medicalization of human distress, rather than just saying like, yeah, sometimes being a human is hard. We always want to medicalize it and diagnose it as something. And then finally, because the DSM is the end all be all and it's used by everybody, it has really tight copyrights, and it makes a lot of money. So the APA makes about $5 million a year on publishing this book. And for a lot of people, they say anytime you start getting money influencing in diagnosis and medical sort of stuff, that can cause problems. And so there are critiques of the DSM. It is still the only thing that we have. It is currently used, but there is some worth and value in saying like, hey, we should also think about these sort of things, right? Having these nuanced views of what is good and helpful, and can we critique things that are maybe problematic. So a lot of you might have enjoyed this semester and learned a lot. Maybe you want to go on to be a therapist or some other sort of clinician of mental health. For a lot of you, you're like, this is really cool, but I don't want to do a clinical sort of job. And so there's a lot of cool jobs that you can get involved in that are related to mental health, but you don't have to be a clinician. So you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be diagnosing people, but there are ways to be involved in the mental health system that are non-clinical that a lot of you are qualified for as bachelor's degree in public health. And so I have a little bit of those ideas on the slides. Finally, just my closing thoughts for the semester. One of the things I ask all of my students across all of my classes to think about is how has this class changed you as a human, as a person? Not just what did you learn about, mental health and mental illness and about trauma, but how have you changed as a person? Education is my passion. Teaching is my favorite thing in the world to do. And so I want people to sit and think about who you were in August, and now who are you here in December? How have you changed as a result of this class, as a result of just time, as a result of the semester, all of these sort of things? How have you changed as a human being to become a different person? You don't have to tell me about that, but I just want you to think about that. How have you changed as a human in terms of thinking about vulnerability and compassion, your ability to understand trauma and traumatize people? How has that moved over the semester? Things that I want you to remember: you're more than your physical body. Yes, physical bodies and brains are really important. They keep us alive, they move us around. However, there's no wrong way to think or to feel or to be. And so I think that's a really important sort of thing. We get this idea that somehow if we're struggling, we're somehow doing life wrong, or that our bodies are failing us. And I think that's really problematic. I think everybody's body and brain and sense of being is really important. And there's no wrong way to have a body or brain. And that you should appreciate sort of the uniqueness that you are. It doesn't mean that everything is good and easy, but you're surviving and you're doing a pretty good job of it because you're here. So anybody who says there's something wrong with you, or you're defective, or you shouldn't love different parts of yourself is an asshole. And so you should tell them to just fuck off, frankly. I hope you remember that mental health is a journey and not a destination. There is no state of perfect mental health. You're always going to be working on this through the ups and downs of life. Even if you do have a mental illness, such as myself, we are more than our mental illnesses. We are not just a mental illness diagnosis. We are human beings with lots of great qualities and a lot of cool things about us. And so it's really important that you recognize that and know that you are more than whatever it is that your struggles are. And I hope you remember that the best way through mental health times and troubles and all these sort of things is to be radically vulnerable. Share those sort of things with the world. Be who you are, and let people see who you are. And I think there's a lot of power in that. Finally, what do you do next? Find a way to merge your skills and your passions. Be a passionate person in whatever it is that you do. Find what it is that you're good at, what you enjoy, and go and do that, whatever that happens to be. Get involved in social causes, activism, volunteering. One of my biggest worries in life is that apathy will take over our society and nobody will give a shit about anything. And that's terrifying to me. And so give a shit about something, anything. It doesn't have to be things that I care about. It doesn't have to be things I even like. If you're passionate about it, go and do that. Give back to your communities in whatever way that you can, because that's really important. That is going to move our world forward and keep us changing and growing and all these sort of things. Be tenacious. Sometimes when we're dealing with overwhelming sort of systems like the public health system and mental health, things can feel really defeating a lot. And we will have defeats sometimes. Progress is slow. Excuse me, oh, my nose itches. But change is possible. We just got to keep going. When we get kicked in the teeth, we get up the next day and say, okay, I'm going to do this again, and keep working. Other classes that I teach, most of you are probably seniors and near the end of your time, but if you're not, I also teach PHHA 265, Human Sexuality, and PHHA 328, Multicultural Health and Health Equity. Both of those I teach in the fall and spring, and so if you're interested in taking another one of my classes, those are the other classes that I teach. Finally, keep in touch. One of the hardest parts about being a college professor is that y'all leave us. And so we get to know you for a short period of time and then you leave and then we're sad. Yes, we get new students and that is enriching, but also we miss you when you leave. You're all really great people. And so stay in touch. You can email me if we're ever back on campus and you happen to be on campus. I'm in Butte Hall on the 6th floor. Follow me on social media. I'm very vocal and very outrageous in a lot of ways on social media. So if I'm a little much for you now, I'm going to be even way more much on social media. But I accept friend requests. You can follow me, all those different sort of things if you want to stay engaged. Not a requirement, but just an offer there that it's okay. Other than that, I have enjoyed you this semester. Wish I could have met you all in person, but that's neither here nor there. I hope you have a good break. Take care of your mental health and focus on self-care. All right, bye.